I'm excited about this new series. It's called Sticky. We're leading our leadership teams through a book called Sticky Teams. And I want to preach the beginning of 2024, a sermon series entitled Sticky, because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you look around at Impact, especially on Sunday morning, you all have done an incredible job the last year. I mean, the way we greet people, the way we care for people, the way we feed people, the way we minister to people, our setup. Can we appreciate our setup team for this today? This is incredible. And these are what I would call the mechanics of ministry. And I know that at one point in time, Impact was a very sticky church. It was like anybody who walked in the door had to stick because there was an electricity here. And then we lost it a little bit, right? I haven't forgotten about it, just so you know. And then we hit some hard spots, and now we're in the process of recovering it. And I believe if we begin to just grab back onto some sticky principles, we can see Impact become more than we could hope or imagine. How many of you want Impact to be more than you could hope or imagine? How many of you want your life to be more than what you could hope or imagine in Christ, right? That's what we're doing here. And so one of the reasons I felt the need for this, and this was actually a big adjustment here in the middle of the week. God hit my heart with this. This is very much from the Lord, like where I was just like, yes, Lord, I'll preach it. I'm excited about it. We'll do it. It's because we are now 50-50 congregation. We are about 50%. Long time since the beginning. You've set up and torn down for 9 years solid, right? And then we have about 50% of the people sitting who have come in the last year. And I think one of the things that has to happen for us to become sticky is we have to begin to meld our hearts together and become one cohesive group again. And so if I were to explain this series in a nutshell, it's this. It's to help you become the person and Impact become the church that people love to be around for the glory of God. That's it. If you want another word for sticky would be endearing. Let's talk a little bit about sticky for a second. Let's say night game at Memorial Stadium in the heart of the SEC schedule for the Gamecocks. Sticky or not sticky when you're there? What are you going to say? What is it? Tell me. Yeah, no, it's sticky. You know, Dax went to a Gamecocks game, and man, he said, Dad, that environment was electric. It was unbelievable. How about Death Valley during Dabo's first season, winning a championship? Sticky, not sticky to walk in that stadium? What is it? You can talk. What was it? Sticky, yeah. Not everybody likes football, so let's go to malls. Haywood Mall, sticky or not sticky? Some of you are saying, yeah, it's sticky, all right. It's the other kind of sticky, right? What if we go over to Greenville? How's that mall right there, right? Sticky, not sticky to walk in that mall? It's different, yeah. Today I get to reward Dax because the tickets got so cheap. I don't know if you saw the article that some tickets dropped to like $5 for an NFL football game because the Carolina Panthers are so bad that when I saw that, Dax's favorite team is the Bucks, and I said, you know what, Dax, good news. You get to go to an NFL football game. We would never do that, but at this price, you get to go see your team. But why are the prices so low? When you go to the Carolina Panthers stadium right now, is it sticky or not sticky to be at? Yeah, you're like, oh, man. And unless you're the opposing team trying to win your division, then it becomes a stickier moment. Well, listen, people walk into church. We could do the same thing with churches. I want to give you a little assignment here, and you're going to have to say it out loud. I want you to put in your heart and your mind two things, and you could make it up, get like approximate. The church, I want you to say a church name and a church year. It could be this one, could be some other church, doesn't matter. Church name and a church year. For instance, for me, I'm going to say Church in the Farms, 1996. I want you to say the stickiest moments of church you've ever been a part of in your life. In other words, that moment where the church you're at was so endearing, transformation was happening, life change was happening, it was incredible. I want you to think about it. And on the count of 3, I want you to say it out loud, just like what I just did. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Wow. How many of you did something more than 10 years ago? Raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. I want to see it. How many of you did something more than 5 years ago? Raise your hand. How many of you did something, let's go all the way to the other side, more than 30 years ago? Raise your hand. Anybody? Oh, that's good. That's a good thing. I want you to know this. Whatever moment for you that God had for you in store, a place where you were a part of a church that was transforming your life and was endearing, I know that God can do that and even more again. Do you believe that? Listen, our God is a fresh and new God. He wants to do something new, not just as a pep talk for the beginning of the year for Impact. No, He wants to do something so legitimate that it lasts until He comes back. And that Impact is a place where you can start to say, Impact Community Church 2024 is where, wow, I don't know that I've ever experienced church quite like this. I've been a part of some good stuff before, but no, I don't know about this one. Do you believe it can happen here like that? Do you? Are you alive? I'm here to tell you, I do. And I wanted to bring you back to a familiar story. Some of you are going to look at it and go, oh, man, I know all about this. Others of you may say, I'm glad we're covering this and everything in between. But we're going to David and Goliath in 1 Samuel chapter 17. And the title of the message today, each week we'll go over a quality. This is sticky quality number 1. And it's simply the quality of showing up. We show up. If we will commit to showing up in 2024, I believe God will do incredible things. You may say, Dave, that's not profound enough. Didn't I come for more than this? We're going to see today that showing up really matters. And I want to tell you this. After COVID, the truth is the body of Christ has forgotten how to show up. We've forgotten what it means to step into the spiritual battle and stay there day after day, week after week, for the longing of our soul to worship holy God. And so we're going to learn from David here in David and Goliath. And before we get to our key verses, which are 24 through 37, we'll just walk chunk by chunk. I wanted to read in the New Living Translation. For those of you who don't know, although I know most of you do, David was a really young man. He was about 16 to 20 years old, and he was helping his dad and hauling stuff back and forth between his house and the war zone. At this point, Israel and the Philistines were basically on two hills, and there was a valley in the middle. They're facing each other, camped out. There's a big guy taunting them every single day, and he is the Philistines' champion. The people of God were cowering. But the New Living Translation, I love this because it puts a little bit more skin on Goliath to give you just a little bit of a better picture of what they were facing. This is what it says. It's not on the screen. Just listen. In verse 4 of chapter 17, then Goliath, a Philistine champion from Gath, came out of the Philistine ranks to face the forces of Israel. He was over 9 feet tall. He wore a bronze helmet, and his bronze coat of mail weighed, you ready for this? 125 pounds. Told you, this is why I love the New Living Translation. Puts a little more skin on it for you. Here's a dude wearing a 125-pound jacket. Hey, stick that in your New Year's workout plan and eat it right there. 125 pounds. He also wore a bronze leg of armor, and he carried around a bronze javelin on his shoulder. We don't get the full measurements of that javelin, but this is what it says. The shaft of his spear on the javelin was as heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead. The tip weighed 15 pounds. Here's a dude wearing a 125-pound jacket with a 15-pound tip on his javelin, dressed in bronze. Are you getting the picture of how strong this guy was? I mean, when I read this, my mind goes, man, I don't know if I want to fight this dude. His armor bearer walked ahead of him carrying the shield. Poor guy, he just wasn't quite strong enough to carry it all right there, right? So this is where we find ourselves in the scriptures when we pick it up in verse 24. Here we find literally an entire nation in position to show up to do God's work. An entire nation, an entire army right there, like literally just a few steps away, but nobody will show up into the position to see God work. Nobody will step up. And so here in verse 24 is where we pick it up. This is what it says. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. That is Goliath, our strong dude, Mr. Muscles. Have you seen the giant, the men asked. He comes out each day to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife. Ooh la la. And the man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes. I mean, the king is really putting it out there. How many of you would love to be exempted from taxes in 2024, right? I mean, this pretty nice reward. Again, this is why, another plug, I know it's not an infomercial, why I love the New Living Translation. To me, it makes the Bible come a little bit more alive for our era. Verse 26, David asked the soldiers standing nearby, what will a man get? David wasn't there because, like I told you, he's hauling stuff from his dad's house out to the war zone and back and forth. Wasn't really a part of the army, and he was kind of young. What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel? Everyone say Israel. Yeah, that's his first question. Question number 2. Who is this pagan Philistine anyway that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? Everyone say, living God. Ooh. From these verses right here, we get our first sticky principle about showing up. This is quite possibly the biggest decision you have of 2024 in every area of your life as it applies to putting your walk with Jesus into every area of your life. Here it is. You have to decide it's worth it to show up. Why did I have you say Israel? Why did I have you say living God? Because David, at his young age, he hears the problem. He sees the opportunity that this army can go away, all the problems, all this oppression of Israel, all the tension, this guy who's out there making fun of them, it can all go away if someone shows up. And here's what mattered to him. He decided it was worth it. Why? Because he said, Israel is my people, and the living God is my God. And that's enough for me to want to step in. I don't even care about the taxes and the wife. He heard the reward, and the reward, well, it's good, and he got it because he's the one who steps in. It's of no mind to him. What is the key issue that caused movement for him to show up to the battle when he didn't even have to? He wasn't even a part of the army. He could have done what everybody longs to do in 2024, and that's try to get out of anything that may cause pain, right? But not David. He said, these are my people. This is my God. That's where I'll be. I want to ask you to make that decision for Impact Community Church in 2024 on the weekends. Listen, I know we take vacations. I know that there are all kinds of things that go on. But at the end of the day, prioritize it to say, you know what? The people of Impact Community Church, those are my people. And Jesus Christ, he is my God. And when I show up, I'm not going to let my church be the Panthers Stadium at the end of a bad year. I'm not going to let my church be Haywood Mall. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to let it. And the truth is, when we show up, amazing things happen. Now you can apply this, because I told you the point of the series is for impact, yeah, but it's also for you to become a person people love to be around for the glory of God. There are some people who need to decide that their family, this is my family, and I'm going to show up and engage no matter what has happened in the past. Or these are my friends, or this is my neighborhood. Some of you may have to show back up to work and say, these are my coworkers, and I'm going to show up for the glory of God. And he's my God, and I'm going to represent him well. There are all kinds of things that keep you from showing up. Let's read about them. Let's continue. 1 Samuel 17, verse 27 through 33 says this. And these men gave David the same reply. They said, yes, that is the reward for killing him. They tell him about the taxes and the woman right there. But when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. "What are you doing around here anyway?" he demanded. "What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of?" David was the runt of the litter, the youngest of his brothers. "I know you're about your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. You're just a little kid around here fooling around." "What have I done now?" David replied. "I was only asking a question." He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sent for him. "Don't worry about this Philistine," David told Saul. "Here's the king, King Saul. I'll go fight him." "Don't be ridiculous," Saul replied. "There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. If you want to be a person who shows up and creates a sticky family, a sticky faith, a faith people love to be around, you want to see your children and grandchildren become people that are electric and contagious. You want to see your spouse or the person you're dating, or maybe you're not dating anybody. You're going, how do I attract a godly Mr. or a godly Mrs.? Listen, part of how you become sticky is this principle right here. Don't listen. Quit listening to the wrong voices. And I have to tell you, sometimes the wrong voices are really good and well-meaning people. Just because the voice is bad doesn't mean that their intention is always bad. But I will tell you, from 25 years of ministry, whenever you try to do God's work, you will always draw out people who are going to try to block you and stop you and tell you why you can't get it done. I remember in Montana, you ready for this? I was told almost every week by people who loved me, multiple people, "Dave, if you would just learn how to preach better, this church would grow better." Do you know that it was the fastest growing church in the city? And for a while, it's in my head. I was going, man, this thing can't go well. This church stinks. This is awful. Why? All because I can't preach, because I'm not a good enough preacher. Wow. The second you start to think about that, and even when it's from people who you know they love you, you know it. You know they love you. So you start to go, wow, I must be the only problem. And if I could just, the truth is what I found out, I can't preach good enough. Listen, you can't sing good enough. It's the power of God, baby. Listen, if God can give me Amy Carroll on how I look, I know he can do a lot of things that are beyond my comprehension. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm a blessed dude. Look at that. I got skinny just for like 1 year, just so I could hook her. And then I blew back up, right? And that's what happened. I became chubby again. And now she loves my chubbiness. And I love that you love my chubbiness. But listen, the wrong voices. There are going to be people who tell you, I'm going to talk to long-term impact for a while, for just a quick second. Not a while, a second. There are going to be people who have left the church from years past before, when all the trouble hit, who are going to go, oh man, that church, it's never going to amount to anything again. They just got that property and there's nothing on there. And you're going to feel the taunt of that. Listen, that's the wrong voice. Maybe you're new and you're still waiting to connect a little bit more. And you're going, man, I don't know if I've truly connected yet. I like, basic showing up on Sunday, but am I really going to put my heart in this thing? Am I ever really going to connect? I don't know. It's been 4 weeks. I don't know if I've connected. It's been 4 months. Listen, don't listen to that voice. Can you connect? You know who connects at a church really well? People who just decide to go all in. You know what? They serve, they give, they show up ready to encounter Jesus. They're not listening to the wrong voices. Listen, David had everybody and people who actually were for him in his life, telling him what he could not do. And newsflash, don't be a person who discourages the people closest to you. Be a person who encourages. You want to know what the truth is? If you know anybody for more than 5 minutes, you can pick out something bad about them. I promise, and you can tell them about it, and you can tear it down. But I think we need to become a people. What's sticky? We show up and we cut through the wrong voices and we listen to the voice of Jesus who says, you are chosen, who says, I want to use you. The voice of God that says, you are more than a conqueror. The voice of God who says, I have plans to use you and to see people come to know me in this community and around the world because you are sold out for your faith. And you know what's even crazier about the wrong voices in the passage here? They were right. David was the runt of the litter. He shouldn't have been at battle. He probably was a little bit of a young kid just trying to see the front lines. They were right, but where they were wrong is he was the man for the job that God had called to step up and to show up and to be the person in the spot. Are you with me on this, Impact? But you know what? We're people that we love. We love the voices, if we really admit it. Even the ones that tear us down, because they give us excuses. And excuses are like armholes, right? Yeah, that's right, I said it. Because everybody has them, say it with me, and they all, what are they? They all stink. Everybody, look at the excuse note right up here. You got that excuse note? How many of you remember in school, you loved when you got to get an excuse note, right? I mean, because an excuse note when you were in school meant there was no penalty for missing class, right? And so we love the excuse note, and we love see, it wasn't even so bad to be sick. You know, when you're an adult, you hate getting sick. When you're a kid, you're like, if I'm sick and I go to the doctor, I could ask the doctor for an excuse note, and then I could milk it out of my mom and see if she'll let me stay home an extra day, and I could play Nintendo or Xbox or whatever it is, right? So, PlayStation, and I can milk this thing, and I can do it all, and it's going to be okay when I show up. They're going to go, oh, but you have an excuse note, right? And I think we got to start trashing our excuse notes. God, I don't know. I don't know if I really belong here enough. I don't know if I found my place of service yet. I don't know if they have the right Bible study for me yet. I don't know. We give God so many excuse notes to not show up and be who he's called us to be in the church that he's planted us in. And you know what? You have them, and here's the truth. I have them. If you don't think they don't go through my head, you'd be wrong. They go through everybody's head. They go through absolutely everybody's head. But we need to take those excuse notes and chunk them to the ground, and we need to show up with the power of God in hand. And so our final little chunk of verses here, we have 1 Samuel 17, 34 through 37. It says this. I love this. But David persisted. He persisted. I have been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion or a bear comes to steal a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it to this pagan Philistine too. Here it is, my people, my God. For he has defied the armies of the living God, the Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Philistine. We put away the wrong voices, but here's how we are compelled to show up in boring times and hard times. In good times, you know, there are too many people who walk away when life is going well. They stop showing up in the presence of God and for the purposes of God. But here's what we do, and I love it. We remember, go ahead and throw it up there. We remember all the times God showed up for me. How many times has God showed up for you? Here in the middle, how do you combat the wrong voices? You don't do it by self-help and telling yourself how great you are. I gave you that illustration about preaching. You want to know what? When the light bulb clicked on, I realized it wasn't trying to convince myself I could become a good enough preacher or work harder. No, how did I cut through the wrong voices? I stopped and recounted all God had done. And when you remember what God is doing, you remember the work he's doing. Listen, God can repair your marriage. If you're young, God can set you on a career path. He can give you a hope and a future. God can do all these things. And how do we know that God can do these things? Because He's already done them over and over and over for us in our life. If you're breathing air today, God has sustained your life. You know, nobody's even promised today. If you need to go that basic to remember what God has done for you, you're breathing air, you're alive, you're here. Somehow God has protected your life. But for most of us, God has done even more than that. He's brought you through a tough upbringing, up into Christ, to have a full life in Christ. And some of you, He's restored your family. Some of you, He's taken you from financial ruin and put you on a solid rock. Some of you, where you couldn't commit to anybody, you were sexually active your whole life, and He's given you an amazing marriage with one man and one woman. Some of you have had other struggles, and He's brought you through. I don't know what it is, but the biggest thing is all of us were far from God in darkness apart from Him, and He brought us from death to life through Jesus Christ and His work on the cross, right? This is how we become sticky, and this is what compels us to show up. Not the voices and what people think about us, not even what we think about ourselves, not even whether they're right or wrong, but it's the power of our God and what He does. That's why you're going to show back up in the tough situation. That's why there's a parent in here that needs to hear they're going to step back up and show up to their kid who's tough to deal with. There's somebody who's caretaking who has to step back into that caretaking with some strength. There's somebody here who needs to step back into their work with the right attitude tomorrow morning, on Monday morning. And I know this. We remember what God has done through Impact and PS, lest you forget. You know, all the other voices and the voices in our head who, you know, it's funny, one bad season or one bad thing tends to dominate our minds. But the truth is, God's done a lot of awesome stuff here at Impact Community Church. Do you believe that? I mean, a lot of amazing things. There have been people who have been fed. There have been people who get their school supplies. There have been tons of people impacted for faith in Christ. There have been missionaries sent out of our church. There have been people who have been pursuing ministry. There are kids growing up here. There are amazing things. There are adults starting to grab some unity, and we're going to get a hold of a vision in 2024, and we're going to grab onto it and ride it hard and see what God can do with it. Are you with me on this? But we got to remember all the times that God showed up for us. I'll tell you, showing up, it's a kind of a simple concept, I know. You're not going to leave here and say, wow, I never knew that. But this isn't a knew that. This is a do that. This is a do that. Not a knew that message. Bring somebody with you. Start showing up and making this place all God wanted. We look for reasons and excuses to get out of things, but we never know the consequence. Kind of like the penguin. All right? I want you to take a look at this penguin. Isn't it cute? Everybody say, oh. Now, this penguin probably doesn't mean much to you, and honestly, it doesn't mean much to me, but I can tell you it was the beginning, a penguin was the beginning of me learning how to not show up for class as a senior in high school. I walked into my oceanography class my senior year, and it happened to butt up against lunchtime. And as a senior, I don't know about you, but I thought, man, if there was any way I could extend my lunchtime legally, I'm all for that. Can I get an amen? Guys, are you there? Yeah? And so, you add on to it, I'm a kid who grew up in Miami. I grew up in boats. I was literally raised, I wouldn't be surprised, if my dad had the option, he would have born me in a boat, all right? I grew up all around the water. I may not have known the technical term for everything, but I pretty much knew at one point in time an awful lot about the ocean, and there wasn't anything they were going to teach me. Sound familiar? Kind of like church sometimes. When you've been around church long enough, you go, where am I going? What am I doing? Well, my teacher, I walked up and I said, hey, is there anything that special going on that would allow me to maybe come in a little bit late if my lunch runs over. And she looked at me and she goes, well, you know, I do love penguins. And I went, oh, really? You love penguins? You're going, this is the oddest illustration. Well, it is odd. It was a weird moment. I was like, well, so what are you saying? She goes, well, anytime I get anything with a penguin on it, it makes me happy. She was an odd lady, I have to be honest with you. And I couldn't even believe this was working, right? And so, would you know it, our favorite lunch stop was Reuben's Cuban. And the next day when I was there, I noticed on the throwaway mat, printed throwaway mat that they give you, that you put your plate on top of, there was a massive, what am I going to say, penguin on the sheet. And so I went, oh, score. We come here like almost every day. So every time I come here, it's like an excuse note. I come, I'll hand her the penguin, and then she's going to say, oh, well, I'm glad you came. And I could show up 30, 40, sometimes an hour late for 5 minutes at the end of the class. And, you know, I got an A in the class. There wasn't anything I didn't know, and I didn't show up. Well, it worked. I showed up. I gave her the piece of paper with the penguin, and I said, how many of these will work? And she goes, I love penguins. A new penguin every day makes me happy. It'll be excused. And I went, oh, really? So off I went. I started missing class. Well, let's go ahead and hit the fast forward button. All the way to I'm dating Amy Carroll. It had evolved in college into contest with my friends to see who could make the most classes and get the best grades. All right, now, how many of you think less of me right now? You should. All right, you should. If you're in college or if you're a student, don't do this. This wasn't a good idea. But let me show you how showing up. I thought I was winning out by not showing up in the key area of my life. At that point in time, my key responsibility was college. At this point in time, you have a few key responsibilities in your life. You have your walk with God. You have your family and your marriage or your close friendships if you're not married, or your dating relationship. You have those things. You have your work relationships. Maybe you have a couple key play relationships or hobbies. But outside of that, those are the places you got to show up. But most of the time, we think we're winning when we don't get to show up, right? Well, it came to a place where I was missing a lot of class in college, and I was actually winning the contest. And I had a B in a class that I had missed 16 times that semester, and it was okay. Until one day, I was walking on campus trying to get to my next class after the one that I missed, and Amy stops me, and she goes, yo, bro, where were you? And I went, what do you mean, where was I? She goes, every day we're dating, and I show up at the end of this class, and I want to see you. And I went, guys, I'm a dude, so I went, I never thought about that part, you know? The big prize was getting wasted because I thought I was winning by not showing up, by making excuses, by not remembering all the good things that had happened from showing up. And here it was impacting my most important earthly relationship going. I want to tell you this. When we show up like David, I know most of you are going, wow, I've never heard a sermon like this on David, because almost every time it's about defeating the giant. But you want to know what? The giant was defeated. All David had to do was show up and experience the power of God. All he had to do was step in to the hole that no one else would step into. And listen to what he says in 1 Samuel chapter 17 and verse 45. This gives you the heart of David. This gives you the heart, and it gives us our bottom line principle for sticky quality number one of showing up to become a sticky person, a sticky church people love to be around for the glory of God. Verse 45 says, David replied to the Philistine, you come to me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come to you. I'm showing up. I'm coming to you. You don't even have to come to me. I'm coming to you. in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, who you have defied. It gives us our principle. This is amazing. You ready for this one? I want us to read it out loud. Ready, set, go. When I show up, I get to see God show out. Say it again a little stronger. When I show up, I get to see God show out. You see, all those people who had easy access to David's spot in front of Goliath that day, the entire army, they had all the earthly things. They were right there. They even had the invite to step into it. They were supposed to do it, and they did it. But it was the one who showed up in the spot in front of Goliath that got to see God show out. How many of you would love to see God show out in your life in 2024? Yeah, that's right. How many of you would love to see God show out in some of the places that are barren and broken? How many of you would love to see the places where you are knocking out of the park for the Lord, and God goes, hey, look at this. You thought that was cool? Look what I can do right now by my power. That is the value of showing up. When you show up, you get to see God show out. And I would love to say that Impact Community Church is going to be a place in 2024. I don't know this. This depends on you, not me. That we're a place that shows up to see God show out in this place, to see the lost found, to see broken relationships restored, to see forgiveness reign, to see people's needs met like never before. You know what? I believe that if we show up, we might see God show out on our 11 acres. How many of you would love to see God do that? Right there. You know, I believe if we will show up in 2024, our God always does what he says he will do. He's a faithful God. You can trust him. Why do we know this? Because we remember everything he's done, and he is good. You can trust God. I can trust God. Let's show up in 2024. Make this a sticky place.